Hello, my name is Harley Naumann, and I'm working in the area of forage physiology in the Division of Plant Sciences at the University of Missouri. Today I'll be talking to you about the use of Sunn Hemp in cool season grass pastures. I've got numerous collaborators that work on the projects I'll be talking about today, including Dr. Dave Davis and Nicholas Matheny at the Forage Systems Research Center, as well as Dusty Walter, Brent Booker, Gatlin Bunton, and Chrissy Wheeler at the WordAC Research Center. This first slide that I'm going to talk about represents the yield distribution of typical cool season grass, such as tall fescue in Missouri. And the typical system in Missouri might include the tall fescue or some other cool season grass that's similar, as well as the clovers, red clover and white clover. And the problem that you see here is that we still have this area which represents a lack of forage production and oftentimes a lack of forage nutritive value available to livestock. It's most exacerbated in the August and September months. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is one of the tools that we might use to fill that void in forage availability. The tool that I'm going to be talking about is Sunn Hemp, scientific name Crotalaria juncea. It's one of many Crotalaria species that is rapidly growing, high yielding, with a high potential for forage production. Some of its important characteristics are that it is a summer annual legume, and being a summer annual, it's adapted well to both tropical and subtropical conditions. So the warmer conditions, the drier conditions that may occur during those months actually are conducive to additional growth by this plant. This plant is also well adapted to poor fertility soil conditions, which makes it typically a low input type of a crop because it doesn't require the phosphorus and the potassium inputs that some of our other forage legumes might. A huge advantage of this plant in our system is that it fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere. It takes atmospheric nitrogen and turns it into plant nitrogen, which equates to plant protein, which can improve the nutritive value of the forage on offer. There's no indication that this plant causes any bloat in livestock. And in addition to its rapid rate of growth, we're interested in its high potential for regrowth following harvest events, primarily grazing events. So if we look at this picture of a plant here on the right, we see here's a previous harvest point. Before the harvest occurred, the plant was a single stalk with leaves up and down that stalk. But once we've harvested and we get regrowth occurring on Sunn Hemp, we end up with numerous branches being developed. And so we essentially change this plant from a single stalk growth habit to a multi-stalk growth habit, which can increase the amount of forage that we have on offer from the Sunn Hemp component. To stick with this concept of regrowth, just to show you another example. So these cows in the video on the right are making their first pass through Sunn Hemp. So they're doing first grazing and removing the tops of the plant and creating those break points. And then what you see here on the left is Chrissy Wheeler, a master student in plant sciences, is standing in an area of Sunn Hemp that has been previously grazed and allowed to regrow for 21 days. Compared to the Sunn Hemp to the left of Chrissy, which is quite taller, it's never been grazed. So it's a single stalk, growing much taller and much more upright as opposed to the more bush type growth habit that we've created following the first grazing. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about establishing Sunn Hemp into perennial cool season grass pastures, as you can see in this image here. There are a couple of considerations that we need to have when we're thinking about establishing Sunn Hemp into perennial cool season grass pasture. And the first one is to minimize competition. And there are a couple of ways that we might do that. One is we may use our livestock to graze the material down to a stubble height of around 3 to 4 inches. And then following that grazing, we would remove the livestock and we would plant the Sunn Hemp directly into the sod using a drill. Another way that we might minimize competition is to hay our pasture. And so we may cut the hay and remove it. And once the hay bales are removed from the pasture, then we can go behind that event and plant the Sunn Hemp in with a drill. The second major consideration that we have to have is soil temperature. The earliest we would want to plant Sunn Hemp in the spring would be when the soil temperature reaches 70 degrees. Usually that happens around the first week of June. That doesn't mean that you have to plant the Sunn Hemp that early. We have planted Sunn Hemp as late as July 31st and just about every date in between the warm up in July 31st, and have gotten successful forage crops. As far as seeding rate is concerned, we typically recommend a 30 pound per acre rate with a drill into perennial cool season grass. As you can see here, the 30 pound per acre rate allows enough sunlight into the canopy for both the grass component and the legume component. And the plants, the Sunn Hemp plants, are not too crowded that they outcompete one another. And the 40 pound per acre rate and 50 pound per acre rate, what ends up happening is the plants are so close together that they are creating too much competition with one another, and they end up with stunted growth. And they oftentimes will also close up the canopy such that the grass can't receive any of the sunlight, and you end up with a predominantly legume or Sunn Hemp system. As I mentioned earlier, one of the major advantages of Sunn Hemp is its ability to fix nitrogen. And what you see here in these pictures on the right are some very healthy nitrogen fixing root nodules on some Sunn Hemp that we pulled out of the ground in one of our experiments. If you look here at the figure on the left, what you see is a Sunn Hemp herbage NDFA. And NDFA stands for nitrogen derived from the atmosphere. What you'll notice about the bars here is that all represent nitrogen derived from the atmosphere by Sunn Hemp, and nearly 100%, if not 100%, of the nitrogen in the Sunn Hemp plant is nitrogen derived from the atmosphere. So the vast majority of nitrogen in the plant is nitrogen that has been biologically fixed. And that can provide a boost to the amount of protein in the plant and what it provides to the system. What's also interesting is that nitrogen that is fixed by the Sunn Hemp is shared with the grass component. What you see here is that greater than 20% of the nitrogen that is fixed by the Sunn Hemp actually ends up getting transferred to the cool season grass component. And so you're essentially feeding your cool season grass component with nitrogen from the atmosphere that was fixed by the legume. Now let's talk a little bit about Sunn Hemp in a management intensive grazing system and what we've observed. One of the biggest advantages of having Sunn Hemp in your grazing system is that it increases crude protein and it decreases fiber. If you look here on the left, we have a figure that represents crude protein as a concentration in the plant. And we've got two systems. We got TF, which is tall fescue alone, or TF plus SH, which is tall fescue interseeded with Sunn Hemp. The black bars represent the plant at 45 days after planting. The gold bars represent the system at 55 days after planting, and the gray bars represent the system at 65 days after planting the Sunn Hemp. And what you see are two things here when we look at the tall fescue alone. Two things. One, crude protein decreases during the season. And two, the crude protein concentration is less than that of the system that has Sunn Hemp interseeded in it. So in the tall fescue plus Sunn Hemp system, we have, not only do we have crude protein remaining steady over this time period, but we also have the crude protein being greater than that of the tall fescue by itself. The figure on the right represents NDF, or neutral detergent fiber. Okay? And what you notice is in the tall fescue system, the fiber is greater than that of the tall fescue that is interseeded with Sunn Hemp. So tall fescue with Sunn Hemp has greater protein, lesser fiber, which equates to greater nutritive value to livestock overall. And so what impact does that have on livestock production? Well, what we've observed in our systems is an increase in overall animal production when you have your cool season grass system interseeded with Sunn Hemp. Sunn Hemp doesn't only impact the animal production, it also impacts the forage system itself in a couple of ways that we have observed. Here on the left, we see that interseeding Sunn Hemp into tall fescue increases the carrying capacity of the forage livestock system, and then also extends the grazing season, as we see in this figure on the right. Now, one of the questions that we have received more and more often in more recent times is, well, what about hay? Can I plant Sunn Hemp and make hay out of it? And so this is something that we've embarked upon to try to figure out, is Sunn Hemp a viable forage crop for hay production? And so what we're looking at here is a 14-acre pasture that has been established for several years in cool season grass base. And what we did after we went and harvested the cool season grass for hay, we came in behind that and we planted 30 pounds per acre of Sunn Hemp on June 8th. This video was taken on August 17th. So we're harvesting on August 17th, and we're harvesting to a 4-inch cutting height. So what we're saying there is we're leaving a 4-inch residue of Sunn Hemp and grass behind. The reason for that is to determine if we can get regrowth off of that Sunn Hemp by leaving enough residue behind, which may give us a subsequent hay cutting or a subsequent grazing event of Sunn Hemp and cool season grass. Now, this is a very recent event, and so we don't have all of the information yet, but what we know so far is that we produced 36 round bales on 14 acres, which is about 25 bales per, or 2.5 bales per acre. And those bales weighed approximately 1,000 pounds. The nutritive value analysis on the hay bales is pending, so we don't have that information yet. So stay tuned. You may hear about that in an update to this presentation. With that, that concludes the presentation on Sunn Hemp. If you have any questions, again, my name is Harley Naumann. You can contact me at my email address here or my office phone. I look forward to talking to you and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you.